Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, I want to kind of move in a different direction today. If you are involved in any sort of professional communications, copywriting, or brand messaging for your small business, or say you work inside a big corporate and you are handling the business communications of things, this episode is particularly for you. Because let's face it, right now, I feel like we are inundated with so many brand marketing messages and so much noise that's out there that sometimes as a customer or a consumer or client, you're just not listening to anything. And that, my friends, is a thing we need to simplify. Like how to eliminate the noise in your business communication so that it is the most effective. So, my special guest today, her name is Sabine Harnau, and she is a German-English bilingual strategic communications consultant. She's also a conversion coach and mentor based in Amsterdam. Now, she used to be a former copywriting lead at Lego Group and the communications manager at a London agency. But she started her own agency called From Scratch Communications in 2017 to work exclusively with purpose-driven brands. Her work is all about using the power of communications to integrate sales, marketing, product, and change culture for the better, both internally and in the wider world. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Sabine Harnau. Hey, Sabine.
Hi, Mary. Thanks for having me.
Now, I was saying to you offline, it is always such a pleasure to interview my friends on this podcast, very selfishly because we already have rapport and I already know so many things about you and your business. So I really hope that this is a fruitful conversation for the ones that are listening in today.
Me too.
So I feel like the place where we should begin is to simplify and define what business communications is in your mind. Could you break that down for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I think that's where the noise can sometimes start. When I just type business communications into Google, what comes up is a lot of different things and a lot of advice about PR and reputation management and really what you should do as a company when you're in crisis. I want to take a step back from that and really look at communications as an everyday thing. It's the words we use, the messages we put out there, or even use with our colleagues internally every single day, whether we're working, whether we're not working. It's even the out of office messages in our email system.
Yes.
So all of that, if you do it for a business purpose, is business communications, and it's all in scope of the work that we do.
You know, I think that that's a valid point. And a lot of times we just think about the billboards, the email marketing, the collateral, the flyers that we print up. But, you know, you're absolutely right when thinking about your email signature, your out of office auto reply. These are all your business, your brand communicating out to your prospective clients, your customers and consumers, right?
Yeah, even the signage you use inside the building, if you have one, even the labels in your project management system, if you use one with external collaborators, all of these things communicate something. They show a level of care. They show the kind of relationship you hope to have with other people. And yet we often don't really pause to think before we put the words there. And yes, I talk a lot about words, because I think words are the highest resolution type of communication. Of course, there's also body language, there's design, there's architecture, there's music. Some companies even use scent as a form of communication. Yes. All of that's valid, but it's kind of lo-fi, right? It's more atmospheric, whereas the words are very concrete and very specific. And so we can achieve a lot of change with very small investments, time-wise, and financially, whereas if you want to change all of your brand colors, that's typically going to be quite a big thing.
Right. And so we're not talking about throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. We are literally looking at kind of 80-20 rule, looking at the 20% that we can refine, simplify, or make more effective, right?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
also what I imagine, just sparked in a thought in my mind is that maybe a different episode for a different time is to talk about internal business communications. But really what we're focused on today is external business communications, those
Yeah.
with the outside of the world, not with just internally inside your team, right?
Yes, both count. They're kind of sometimes they're two sides of the same coin.
Sure.
Sometimes the way I talk to my colleagues can influence the way I talk to my consumers or my customers and clients, and they shape a certain communication style, a culture that you transport from the inside to the outside. But a lot of companies want to start with the outside since that's where their revenue is coming from. And so that's often where our work as a team also starts.
So why do you think it's a good idea to optimize it? Like, what are the benefits that one could experience after doing just a little bit of work?
Well, I think the biggest potential outcome you can hope for or expect is an increase in revenue with less financial investment. So better return on your investment, higher conversion rates. That's for some, maybe a new technical term. It's all about the percentage of people who see a touch point or interact with a touch point like your website, your emails, a flyer, something like that, and then say yes to the offer you're making, whether that's scheduling a call or signing up for a newsletter or buying a product or booking you for a service. So we want to increase that rate, that percentage of people saying yes. And that's really the main thing that a lot of companies think of when they work with a consultancy like us.
And
However, there's more, of course.
Yeah. And so when I think about this conversion in particular, I use a lot of times the idea of a customer buying journey. So that horizontal line that goes across from what's the very, very first touch point. For example, with the Simplifiers podcast, sometimes it's just my voice, like hearing a podcast, a friend has referred them to a shared an episode and they go, who is this girl? What does she do? Why should I listen to her? And then they maybe listen to a couple episodes and they go, oh, there's something here, maybe. And then the idea is that they go, oh, well, the freebie that she talked about at the beginning of the episode, that sounds of interest. That is a challenge I'm trying to solve. And they opt in. So they say yes to the freebie, which is, converting them from just a random listener out in the world to now somebody who is inside our ecosystem, is somebody that we are now aware of, that's out in the world, that's listening, that we can help, solve one of their problems, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're going for. So the scenario you've described, you could call that a micro conversion. They're still on the path to at some point maybe becoming a paying client of yours, or you could think of other companies, like if you sell sportswear, then maybe at some point they'll buy a pair of sneakers.
Yep.
But there's a lot of different points on the way there. And we want to make sure that these points are teed up in the right way and presented in the right way, that we make the right offers at the right time for people to find it really easy and logical to say yes. That's one outcome that we typically work towards. But when we focus on that, we experience that for the companies that we work with, whether it's a solopreneur or a corporation, there's a lot of additional benefits. And typically what happens is things suddenly feel easier. In the beginning, there's maybe sometimes a ramp, almost like a learning curve where, there's a new way of thinking. There's maybe new information that I've not really looked at before. But after a few weeks, maybe, I think really that's all it takes, of immersing yourself in that way of thinking, suddenly a lot of noise falls away and the signal comes out so clearly in the foreground that our clients typically do less marketing. They spend less effort on things because they have that clarity.
Yes.
That tells them what they need to focus on. There's this 80-20 rule. 20% of your effort is going to give you 80% of your success. And that's really what this is all about.
And, take it from the customer's point of view, when the message is clear, when the offer is spot on to what I actually need, the customer buying journey is so easy and effortless. And that's the kind of experience that a customer wants and desires, right? Make it easy for me. And that makes it so much easier for me to go out and tell the world about you, because I'm like, oh my God, it was so nice and easy to work with from scratch communications. Like, it was so easy to work with Sabine. It's so easy to go to the Simplifiers podcast to get what I need. Like, that's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah, it builds trust. And it avoids confusion. And one thing I learned in my training from Joanna Wiebe is that, quote, a confused mind never buys. So if I, as the company or the service provider offering something, don't have that ultimate clarity myself, how can I hope to give it to my client or my prospect? I need to have it first so I can pass it on and really structure the thing for them. And that's what we're looking to help our clients achieve.
Well, and also, if you've got 80 bazillion messages going out there with 80 bazillion products, you are also spinning kind of out of control. And that's not easy for you either, right? Or your team.
You just end up being frazzled. Yeah. And if you have a team and different departments, maybe even, where some people look after marketing, some look after sales, some look after your products or services, some look after customer service, the more you get frazzled in one department, the more it will catch on to everybody. And suddenly it's like when I speak to a different department, suddenly I feel like I'm in a different world. They're selling something different. Apparently their customer persona is different. Their branding isn't really up to scratch anymore. Like, they're using the logo from 2015 still in their email signatures. And we're now chuckling, but it's the reality of a lot of companies that I've worked with over the last couple of years, where all of a sudden there's this pocket of misalignment, and it's just causing friction on a daily basis. And that kind of friction means that we're spending time, energy, money on something that's not driving any positive outcomes at all. And that's where we need to achieve clarity and bring everybody along on the journey. Now, that sounds... well, it sounds very pastoral, like shepherd-like, but really it's a co-creative effort. It's something where the team needs to come together to create their future together. And that's the fun part about this kind of working. It's not like somebody coming in magically and directively saying, and this is the gospel that you all need to follow. No, it's a workshopping effort. It's a fact-finding effort. And when I say effort, that sounds like heavy labor, but really most people are just curious and enthusiastic, and they don't want to stop. Like, at some point we have to say, okay, we have enough information now. Let's not, create more noise by digging even deeper. At this point, we need to just work with what we've got and get to play with it.
Yeah. And I think play is the operative word here, because a lot of times, now, gosh, I've owned the Simplifiers for 19 years now, which seems crazy. But, in the first few years, you're literally throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And then somewhere in the middle, you're like, oh, I know what sticks. And now I get to play. I get to add that kind of curious, inquisitive energy into this to say, well, what could I refine? How can I adjust ever so slightly just to get to that sweet spot that the customers, the listeners, whoever are really gaining value out of? And I think that's where I think a lot of times we get stuck, if I can be so bold to say, is that we don't look at it as play and we go, oh, this is heavy lifting, or this is too much, this is too overwhelming. And a lot of times we ignore, because we're like, well, that's just going to be too painful, that I'm going to have to change too much, or it's going to have to cost too much. And so we don't do anything at all, right?
Yeah. And again, as a small business owner myself, I really sympathize with that. And the moments when I feel the least playful are the moments of biggest information overload and noise, really weighing me down. It's like those moments when I have a huge to-do list in Asana and most things are on hold and overdue because I never got around to doing them. So, this happens to me too. I don't want to say that in any way I'm beyond that. I think what's important then is to refocus on what actually matters. What are those 20% that make the 80% difference? And every time that happens to me, what I go back to is also what we do with our clients. It's looking at, okay, who are we as a team? from scratch. Who am I? Who's everybody else that I'm working with? How do we show up in the world reliably? What do our clients tell us about what they love about working with us? But then also, who is our audience? How do they show up when they first sign up for our newsletter or get in touch after reading a blog post or something like that? Where are they in their journey? What's their problem, their pain? What do they want to get out of reading our content or engaging with us? And then at the point where they're considering working with us, where are they then? And then gathering as much information about that as possible, even down to quotes, where people left us feedback in a form or just sent an inquiry or something like that. And really looking at what people said to find the patterns. And then that really helps me to readjust and say, okay, clearly people want these 3 things. So everything that's on my list that's not these 3 things, I can throw out and I won't lose anything because it's not what matters the most to the people who matter the most to us, namely the team and our clients. And then the other thing that I also want to bring in here always is objectives, because that's the thing, right? When we look at what clients have told us in the past or what prospects have told us in the past or leads, we're looking at the past. That's what got us here. It's not necessarily what gets us to the next step. So we need to always refocus on what is that big objective that we want to reach. And that's a whole other layer where we can let a lot of noise creep in if we listen to all of these goal-setting experts on the internet who say, you need your goals to be smart. You need your goals to be like this. Here's my formula for goals that make you 7-figure, income and stuff like that. When in actual fact, it's quite simple. An objective is just a goal. You don't have to make it smart from the get-go. That's the next step. That's the strategy and the tactics that you build on top of your objective. But first of all, it's enough if you set a goal that's about how you want to feel. It's enough if you set a goal about where you want to live in 5 years' time. You don't have to go that much deeper at that stage. That's where as a next step, you can then make a plan. And that's where being smart, specific, measurable, actionable, what was the R again for, Mary? Relatable and timely, time-bound. That's where that comes in. But it's not necessarily the fact for your objective. Your objective can be much bigger and bolder than that. And if I may share one thing as a female business owner, I think that's where being socialized female can really get in the way. Our objectives tend to be safer, smaller than what we could really achieve if we let ourselves off the hook and just allowed ourselves to dream and then come up with a reasonable plan.
Yes.
But the objective first.
You know what I think is really fascinating about your approach when defining your goals and objectives for your brand is kind of counterculture to what's being spewed out there right now. And, let's just call a spade for a spade. Simon Sinek with Start With Why is this fantastic book, However, you actually believe to start with who. Why is that?
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about writing a counter book to the Start With Why. I think Start With Why has its place. But it's not a good guide for how you approach your positioning and your overall communication as a company and a brand.
Yes.
Because the why is also, it needs to be relevant to people. Ultimately, anyone who's going to be buying from you, who's going to be buying into your why, you need to be able to position that why in a way that they feel, oh, yes, I share that why. And sometimes the way you phrase it can make all the difference. And also, it's very tangible when you just think about language. You would probably expect a French company to phrase their why differently from an American company or a company in sub-Saharan Africa. But also when we think about where people live, different whys are important to different people around the world. So it really makes a lot of sense to think about who your audience is and what whys matter to them as well as you, so you can align with them. If you don't care about people, then they won't care about your why. Yeah. So I always advise start there and then find the right words for your why, and make it relatable to your audience.
And again, when you're bringing the concept of who into play in your strategic planning for your goals and objectives, then they are anchored. They have intention, and let's be real, like when the going gets tough or you hit busy season and you're holding on by a thread, because sometimes that's real, you remember why you're doing the things that you're doing. The goals and objectives are strong, built on a firm foundation, because it's anchored with your ultimate ideal client, right?
Yes, and it helps you so much to niche and focus without it feeling glued on or like an afterthought. Because if you really want to serve a certain type of person or people with a certain type of problem, which I find actually easier, I like to think about the problems that they have and that I want to have solved, the jobs to be done. I think that's a very useful framework, the jobs to be done framework, much more helpful than thinking about, Mary, aged this, lives there, has this kind of job, has two kids or none, owns a dog or none. I don't know. I mean, it's unless I'm selling something that's highly relevant to dog owners, it's not going to be so helpful to color in all of those details so much. But if I know what your problem is, like you wake up in the morning and you think X first, then that's really my mission to help you solve that problem. And that also helps me filter, is this other person, let's say Jeff, experiencing the same problem?
Yes.
Well, then maybe they're part of our target group. But if they're not experiencing that problem, then even if they also have 2 kids and a dog and they live in the same town, probably they're not a good fit. Or I can take them in opportunistically, if they feel they want to work with us, then, or if they want to buy the product, great. But if they have a feature request that doesn't serve Mary's problem, then I'm not going to necessarily change my product or my service just for Jeff, because Jeff is the exception. And now I can prioritize according to who I'm actually here to serve.
Yes.
And it sounds really straightforward when I put it like this, I think. But when you think of corporations, or if you think about service providers, I think a lot of times things get confused by the everyday. I have a lot of experience working with companies where we ask the team, so tell us, what is it you do? Can you put it in like 1 or 2 sentences? And the one sentence they tell us is, it varies hugely. And especially in services, I think that rings true for a lot of people probably also listening, because every project seems different. Every client has their own needs, and there's not a lot that's repeatable. You may have a project plan that's for this type of event, or maybe, you've got a way of dealing with wedding photography or whatever it is that you do. But ultimately, it feels different. The locations are different. The people are different. And then finding the common problem that connects all the people you work with is a really good filter to bring it into a manageable proportion of variation. So you can then say, okay, we serve 3 different problems, and we can now tailor our services or our products according to those 3.
Yes.
And also the messaging and the sales process and how we develop that service or product in the future. And this is where it all comes together. Marketing, sales, and product working hand in hand to co-develop that, rather than there being messy handovers and, everyone doing their own thing.
And see, Sabine, this is why you and I are friends, because we drink from the same well. I mean, everything that you're saying are things that I'm over here nodding my head like, yes, yes, yes. And it may seem to a lot of you guys that are listening of like, well, hang on, we're talking about like business strategy, like fundamental building blocks of how to structure your business, your offering, your pricing, all of that. When are we going to talk about communications? But see, that's it. You can't have effective business communications unless your house is built on a firm foundation, right? And this is the piece that I think many times we hop, skip, and jump over that is so fundamental. Before we even talk about copywriting, before we even talk about logos and slogans and brand messaging, this is the stuff that is most important, right?
Absolutely. And actually, I can recommend a Seth Godin post from August this year about this, where I think he says, when does the marketing part begin? And then he says, like, it's all marketing, the product, the pricing, the features, how the thing feels in your hands, it's all marketing.
100%.
It doesn't just begin when you design the colors or the packaging or the website and write the words to go with that. Yeah.
So let's shift gears then and talk about noise in particular. Like, how can you identify what constitutes noise in your business in a practical way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends a little bit on what it is you do. But I suggest sitting down. Mary has this method, I think, that's now well established for anyone who listens to this podcast, of setting a 7-minute timer and just sitting down and writing down the things that are most important for your business success. What do you look at when you measure your success?
Yes.
And just make a list. It can go on for a while, but that's the things that come to mind in those 7 minutes. They are probably your true North Star. Yeah. Anything that you would have to sit down and read 5 blog posts to dig into it, probably not really what you're actually going for. And then once you've got that list, compare it to what it is that you're investing time, energy, and money into. Everything that's not related to the things on your list is likely going to be noise. And in some cases, you might find that you don't have enough data to decide. You don't know, does it actually produce the outcome that you want? And then you need to find a way to establish that data. I think this is actually where a lot of small businesses have a little bit of trouble because of the marketplace that we're in.
Yeah.
A lot of the tools that big corporations use are not accessible to small business owners, or you maybe don't have the expertise on your team to be able to deal with the data and crunch the numbers and all of those things. So it's scary, and a lot of people just put it off. But there are things that we can all do. And one of them is just measuring your energy that you feel, that you can sense in your body, in your mind, when you come out of a certain activity. Do you feel energized or do you feel drained? If you feel drained, that's a warning signal. That's probably not going to feed you or your business sustainably. It's not the only data to go for, but it's really important. I think we often underestimate it. The other thing being feedback from your clients. And it's surprising how many business owners or executives don't actually look at that kind of feedback, or don't have a reliable way to get it even.
Yes.
And every product purchase or every service delivery should really have an opportunity for the client to give you feedback attached to it. If you've not done that in the last 12 months, the best advice I can give is contact your customers, whether they're service or product customers. Find a way to contact them and invite them into a conversation. Just 15 minutes, buy them a coffee. You will learn so much, especially if you can record it, have it transcribed with their permission. Wording-wise, it's going to be hugely helpful for anyone writing your copy, but also you will learn about what matters so much. And you will have a lot of pointers as to what to track in the future, because I think that's the other side of not having data. Often we start out not knowing what data to even look at. What would matter? Do I need to track my income in the same way that this other person I went to school with does? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on your business. And then, of course, numbers also matter. Look at what you sell, how long it takes to sell it. Is it a lot of effort selling a certain thing that you've got in your portfolio of products and services? And just in the beginning, it's maybe not even useful to ask why, and just to note the numbers, just notice what's happening and look at that story. And then over time, that story will emerge. You just need to keep at it and then make the time to revisit that and make decisions based on what you see. That maybe sounds almost like looking at your horoscope, but it's true. Even people who say to me, "Oh, I wasn't good at maths," or "I don't actually look that kind of businessy thinking." When they look at all 3 things next to each other, their numbers, their own energy, and what they get from their clients, or customers, often it's way easier for them to look at it like that.
And I love how you frame that. So listen to the data, listen to your customers, and listen to your energy levels. Really simplifies it down for me. I mean, no matter if you run your own small business or you're inside a larger corporation doing business communications, corporate comms, I think that this does apply either or, because a big organization is going to have just a different set of problems, maybe a couple of zeros added to their budgets, but that doesn't mean that it's any easier. And this is a really succinct way to frame it to help you identify the noise. And I also, as you're speaking there, kind of a light bulb went off for me and maybe for others as well. Noise is kind of two different realms. There's noise as in like what the customer hears and is confusing to them or complicated to them. Like, that's like a lot. You're giving me a lot. I don't know what that is. But then also noise could be defined as extraneous tasks on your plate, the things that you're, well, like, we just have always done it this way. So why don't we do the 28-step blah, blah, blah when we roll out the blah, 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 right? And do you see it that way as well?
Absolutely. And I think one example where it gets really tangible for whatever business size you have is marketing activities, especially in the social media realm. I hardly know any businesses that don't try to at least play on the major platforms. So almost every company I've ever worked with was on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Some even, more platforms like TikToks and Snapchat and all of the others. But even for a corporation, it can be tricky to be true to who they are and serve those four audiences. When you even then think about the fact that the Twitter audiences are not homogeneous. There are lots of subgroups, and you maybe want to talk to all of them. Or maybe you are multilingual, and then you have to have an English account and a French account and a Chinese account or whatever. It gets very messy very fast. And yet, there's almost like this unwritten rule that you have to be present there. And we have stopped exploring how far we can minimize our engagement with those platforms before something breaks. And in fact, my experience is if we reduce our engagement there to what really makes a difference based on the data, based on what our customers tell us and where they're coming from, we can see that, where are they responding? Where are they following the links and stuff like that?
Yes.
Where do they retweet or follow us or share our content and turn up as advocates? But also, how does it feel? Like, which of our social media teams or people are the happiest? Where does work feel like play? If we focus on those things, then all of a sudden we have this new space that we can use for something completely different, like advertising in magazines or papers that are read by our audience, or going on TV interviews, or sponsoring an amazing event somewhere in the neighborhood. Not everything has to happen on meta platforms. But it hampers our creativity if we're kind of locked in to those rules that are just like, everybody does it. We've always done it that way. It's very difficult to break out of that without having a good reason to do so. And that's where I think it really is important that we start everything with what we call research. It's the know phase in our work. Know yourself, know your audience, know what you want to achieve, and then make the decisions.
Yes. Yeah. And then you have to be ruthless to scrap the things that are extraneous. Ruthless.
That requires good internal communication, change management, working together, bringing people around the table, and celebrating the letting go.
Yes, yeah. And so let's talk about that. So how to get alignment inside your team on how you even explain what your brand does. Like, as you said earlier, if you got your team together in front of each other at one table and you said, define what we do in one sentence, will it be shocking if people say different things that are vastly different? Well, tell us more.
Well, we, my team and I, what we do is we have one-on-one conversations with people on the team. So nobody else is present. We don't tell their bosses that Tim in accounting said this thing. So they're in a safe space. They can make as many ums and ahs as they want. They typically tell us really honestly what they think it is they do and what they think they should be doing instead, which is great information. So if you have somebody who's universally trusted on your team who can run those kinds of interviews, absolutely you can do that yourself. But it needs to be that kind of safe space, and then work with what you want to be the outcome. Like, how do we align, create a safe space for people to play with that? And we need input into that, of course. Otherwise, people just go off on their own journeys and they kind of start a sub-business to the one you actually want to have.
Right.
So that's where all hands customer experience comes in. There should be opportunities for everyone who's communicating on behalf of your company to be in touch with real customers, real clients, and listen to them, be in dialogue, ask them questions so they can really tune into what the clients and customers want and need and how they phrase it. Because ultimately, if they don't get it, then it's really been all for nothing. So ultimately, if everyone in your company calls it one thing and your customer has a completely different word for it, my advice is always use the customer's word, and your team will find it really easy to understand that logic when they've spoken to enough customers and seen the resonance and how it lights up people's faces.
Which drives home the point of what you said earlier of when, you take your customer or client, your ultimate ideal customer, not Jeff, but the one that you actually want to work with and replicate. You take them to coffee or on a Zoom call, 15 minutes tops, and transcribe it. The words they use should be the words and the phrases and the terminology that you use in your marketing messages and the things that you spit out. So many times I think that, especially if you're a younger, fresher, newer small business owner, you throw a lot of acronyms out and you throw a lot of like technical terminology because it stemmed from insecurity of like, well, this will make me sound more professional. And like, if I say all these things, then they'll go, ooh, she knows what she's talking about. But the truth is they go, huh? Like, what does any of that mean? I'll just bounce to the next thing, right?
Yes, exactly. And then the other danger that sometimes lurks there is, if you're very scientifically minded, maybe you work in science, then you maybe, you speak like an academic paper, or your website reads like an academic paper.
Yep.
But the people actually buying your service are not the scientists of the company. They're in procurement, or maybe they're the scientist's boss, or they haven't had that kind of training, so they don't get it. And that can be a big obstacle, of course. So it's always important to use the language of your customer as far as you can.
And so, I think that this is really crucial and so important. And, these are the things that we just forget over time, and just bringing them back to light helps to shed a different perspective on it. I know that there are things that small businesses forget when it comes to business communications versus, say, a larger corporate brand. So what are they, and how do you avoid the same pitfalls if you are working on a smaller team?
I think the number one thing is that I've observed is that smaller teams seem sometimes scared to ask certain questions because it's so close to home. And so one question that I think we don't ask nearly enough is, what nearly kept you from buying X today, or from signing up for this, or from booking a consult, or whatever it is you offer? And then just leaving a text field that people can fill in if they want to, and anonymously. So you get feedback on what you've been presenting to them, and then you can improve based on that. I find that asking that question, and you can also ask it actually when you speak to your past customers and clients and ask them, okay, so on the journey to buying a blouse or a wedding photography service or whatever you sell, what nearly kept you from going ahead? that can help you change your offering completely with sometimes very little effort. For example, you might find out that it's something about how you talk about your shipping rates that keeps people from buying. Or maybe your customer service isn't obvious enough, so people feel like, if I have a question, I don't know. Or maybe your cancellation policy is really tricky to find or difficult to understand. Or it could be that you provide a service, but you're based really far away from some of your prospects, and they don't know, is it going to work? Like if I'm based in California and they're based in New York, like how is this ever going to work?
Yes.
So just adding a bit of information about how you've worked with people all over the world is maybe going to give you way more bookings, way more happy customers who are willing to try you out. And without asking that question, you'll never know.
And it's such a simple question, and it requires a little bit of courage to actually ask it. But what valuable information. I was speaking to a listener recently who she relayed over to me that she had a prospective client. It was a big job. She's an interior designer, and her standard practice has been for 7+ years is to get full payment up front. And the client was very nervous about, of course, writing a check for $40,000 up front without any sort of, deliverables at first glance. And, that's exactly what I said is like, when you know why they stumble, what the fear is underneath it, you peel back the onion a couple of layers and understand what the core is there. Then you have places to start really educating your prospective clients on what is the process, what is standard in our industry, and why we do it this way. And then you get to the place where like they go, oh, I just didn't know. It's not a no. It's not a, well, I'm sorry, we can't work with you. There goes 40,000 from your like revenue targets this month or quarter. It's simply a place to begin optimizing that business communications, educating the client to, create future business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes it can be something about the information that you've chosen to include that makes no sense. Like, for example, we've worked with a web hosting company where all of their price plans talk about how many thousands of email addresses you get with every hosting plan. And some of their prospects were like, I don't know, why do I need 10,000 email addresses versus 15,000 or 50,000? I can't decide. So I'm going somewhere where people don't confuse me and I choose to buy somewhere else. Yeah. And actually sometimes just omitting that information or restructuring your pricing plans so they are more focused on solving people's problems rather than just throwing in lots of extras that nobody cares about. Saves you money, but also gets you more customers.
And so some things that you and I talked about offline that I want to reiterate here, like really it's clarifying your message, right? Getting that first and foremost figured out. And, these are captain obvious things, but a lot of times, sometimes we forget, no matter if you're a big corporate brand or a small micro business, but this is important. Tracking your KPIs. How do you measure success? So if that is revenue, if that is opt-ins, otherwise, track them on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And, we've said it over and over again in this conversation, but like truly knowing who your audience really is, and getting clear with that. And that helps you systemize and productize, especially if you're a service-based business, your sales process, you can start to really work more efficiently, no matter if every job feels like it's a custom job. You can still productize and go, okay, well, this is a 20-hour job. This is a 60-hour job. This is a 100-hour job in your, process of determining a price that feels fair and equitable for both you and the customer. But then that's starting to get the cruise ship turned in the right direction to, again, eliminate noise, right?
Yeah. And I actually prefer the natural metaphor of a flock of birds over the heavy tanker.
Yes.
I like that. A flock of birds is more like, I think it's more what many companies feel like, lots of individuals doing their own thing, kind of going somewhere together. But you can't always, like on a tanker, have one captain telling everybody what to do. And there's less hierarchy often in modern businesses as well. I mean, there's obviously still very hierarchical corporations as well. But in small businesses, often it feels like family, it feels like friends, and you want to do things together. But then somehow the flock of birds magically, they're nimble and flexible and agile, and yet they all go there together. That's what we want to achieve. And it's quick.
I love it. I love that so much. And I'm going to use that now. Less cruise ship tanker, more flock of birds. Yes, flock of seagulls, maybe. Hey, if you want to get started on that journey to understanding your audience better, Sabine and her team have got a free ebook and email series that's going to help set you up right. So when you go over to our show notes, which, by the way, everything we talked about is in the show notes over at thesimplifierspodcast.com, and just search for this episode. You'll find a link there to be able to download that. And just so I know, can you give us a little bit of insight on that ebook itself?
Yeah, so the ebook really looks at the main things that you can do to get to know your customers better, from surveys to listening on social media to looking at their cultural differences based on where they are or what their heritage might be, how to deliver customer service according to what you found out, for example. And it's very actionable. It really gives you a checklist at the end of things that you can do, that you can check off to get started on that journey. And nothing is expensive or technically complicated to do. So it's a good start, really.
Excellent. And her website is from-scratch.net. Now, Sabine, you're also a podcaster. Tell us more.
Well, the podcast, it's in German. So
if you speak German, then this is the podcast for you.
It's a good podcast for you. Exactly. It's for people in the creative industries who want to work more in line with their values. That could be leaving behind fossil fuel clients. It could be working without deceptive design. It could be non-manipulative copywriting, just working really in line with what rings true for you.
I love it. Ethical brand marketing. This is the anchor. This ties back to your company's core values, which I think is, again, countercultural to a lot of the things we see out there. So, Sabine, as we wrap up, these are a few questions we'd like to ask every single person that comes on the podcast. So here we go. Rapid fire. What's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
Well, I'm going to share a blog that's doing a little bit of both for me. It's by Nick Milo and called Linking Your Thinking. I think actually it's more a newsletter series than a real blog, but it's all about reducing the noise in your notes, because we have knowledge everywhere. We can just look it up on the internet. And yet, if you're a little bit like me, you have an Evernote account with that's overflowing and a OneNote account that's overflowing. And Nick is all about getting into a habit of using your notes for good, to come up with new ideas. And I find that really inspiring. So less note taking, more note making.
I love it. Yeah, we'll link Nick up and that blog over to thesimplifierspodcast.com if you guys want to check it out. Cool. So tell us, who is one person in your network, somebody you know personally, you just feel is up to brilliant things? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
I thought long and hard about this, and I want to mention Alice Carolina, the founder of The Ethical Move. I've been working with Alice since 2018, and together we are working to set up a movement for ethical sales and marketing. And Alice is really inspirational, sets a great foundation for inclusive working around the world. And I think she's a great conversation partner too.
Brilliant. Oh, I love it. So we will link Alice up in the show notes for you guys if you guys want to check her work out. Again, you can find Sabine and her team over at from-scratch.net. And also in the show notes, you can link up to her in LinkedIn as well and see kind of the journey she's been on, because her professional and corporate journey is well advised into what the work that you do now. I think that the work that you did with Lego and all of that has really helped you shape and help your clients in the current. So my final question for you is this, and thank you again so much for your time today and sharing your wisdom. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now, and they are drowning in the work that they're doing. They are feeling like nothing makes sense. It's full of noise. And quite frankly, their schedule feels full of noise of endless amounts of tasks. They're feeling so overwhelmed. what's one thing you could whisper into their ear right now just to encourage them in this moment?
I would say, don't do anything that feels like it's dragging you down. Think of all the work that you see in front of you as a cake, and eat the piece of cake first that appeals the most to you and that you feel is the most yummy looking.
I love it. Anytime you can align with like cake and tasks, we are winning here. Sabine, big love to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary, for having me.